Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to Reference Point. I'm your host, Dave Cokerhook. I'm very pleased to have Dr. Sunil Pai back again. We're going to pick up where we left off in our last segment of Reference Point, talking about integrative medicine and his book, An Inflammation Nation. Dr. Pai, thanks for coming back.
Thank you for inviting me again.
So your book, Inflammation Nation, we talked a little bit about this last time. The book is really good. I got to say, by the way, it's extremely readable. There is some technical information in here, which for a non-technical, medical technical guy like me I had to, kind of go over a little bit more detail. But for the most part, this is a very readable book for just a layman. So I want to thank you for how well you constructed this material.
Well, that was actually written the way I speak to my patients. So it's very conversational. I did put a little bit of additional science for the physicians or healthcare providers who read the book as well. There's over 1,200 references or 1,500 references in the book, so they can go back and dig deeper and go, okay, let me look up the articles and abstracts that are quoted there. But really, it's a general conversation, and even when it's I also have it on Audible and iTunes. So when people listen to it, because I want it to be engaging. When people come to see me as a client, same thing. It should be an engaging discussion. Integrative medicine is patient centered. And it's healing centered. So, but it's also explaining, from a different aspect that a lot of times doctors never explain to them why or what, why they're in predicament. Why do you have diabetes? Why do you have heart disease? People really didn't even understand the disease itself, right? They just think,
right.
I have a blood sugar problem, I take a pill. And then so I want to have this open discussion of understanding and explaining to my patients, there are certain things in your lifestyle that are contributing to why you have these lifestyle diseases. And once we address it, then they have total full control. And it is putting a little bit of responsibility on the patients, but guess what? You should have the responsibility.
Yeah, well, you would think, right? It's your body, right?
And the problem is that when you give away that responsibility to someone else, like a pharmaceutical drug, then you have to also be willing to accept that there might be some side effects that come along with that. So there's a balance. Like we have great achievements with medicines, but we also want to look at but doesn't mean that it's the answer or key for every solution. Is what we want to look at is what can you do to help improve your overall health, and there's many things that they can do.
Right, exactly. One last comment on the book and whatnot is that the fact that you quote not just studies, but you show the reference for them, I think is very important, because even someone that's more or less of a medical knowledgeable person like myself, who may be interested, right, in trying to figure some of this stuff out, will want to kind of refer to or look toward what are the studies, because there's so much stuff you can see on the internet or whatever. So everybody has an opinion about something. But when you go back and you look at the actual source material, it really shows you and tells you what exactly is going on. And I appreciate that. That's in your book. So thank you for that.
Thank you very much.
Okay, so one of the things that was significant in here, and we sort of touched on it a little bit in the last segment of Reference Point, had to do with the fact that people go out and they take medications. I mean, there's a tremendous amount of prescription medications and over-the-counter medications that are intended to help people with things. And you mentioned the itises and how the inflammation or the way that the body responds and reacts to from an immunological perspective, if that's the right word, how the body is looking to try to take care of these sorts of things. And some of these chronic conditions, there's a tremendous amount, and even some acute conditions, there's a tremendous amount of medications and over-the-counter and prescription medications that are made available. And those are not necessarily, as you said, an optimum way to go. And there's a classification called NSAIDs, which I finally remembered what the acronym stands for. Was it Non-Steroidal Anti-Inflammatory Drug, right?
Right.
So what are NSAIDs really, and what is it about them that is either positive or negative?
So NSAIDs is a class of over-the-counter and prescription drugs that are all called non-steroidal anti-inflammatories. These include as simple things as going from an aspirin, for example, to something like an ibuprofen, okay, to something like a naproxen, to something like a celecoxib. So when we think of ibuprofen, think of like a brand name like Aleve or Motrin or Advil, and naproxen would be like an Aleve kind of thing, and celecoxib would be like Celebrex. These are the brand names that people kind of hear on television, but there's generics of those, right? You can go to any kind of Walgreens or Walmart or Costco, and they have their generic of that molecule. NSAIDs are it's basically a third of the population take an NSAID daily. So it's one of the most prescribed or most over the counter when you combine them together, medication that people take. A third of the population take it. There was about, I think, I forget how many hundreds of millions of doses that were purchased and they're prescribed. The data is in my book. But when you look at these anti-inflammatories, is that the growth of the anti-inflammatory market continues to rise, almost like exponential. So every year it's a little bit better than, their sales are a little bit more than what it was before. And even in my book, I even mentioned this area where we're looking at the marketing, even who they're marketing to. It used to be when I was a kid, we used to see these NSAID commercials, say for ibuprofen or for naproxen, for example, and it would be someone, maybe 65 or older, maybe retired, playing golf, playing with our grandchildren, oh, I have a little bit of elbow pain or back pain and I take this pill. Now you see little, children on their bicycles with backpacks, for these commercials, because we're now understanding that inflammation is affecting everybody.
Right.
But instead of looking at, what are the causes of that inflammation through their diet and lifestyle environment and whatnot, is that we're looking at, well, here, let's just give people more pills. The problem with the pills, particularly when you look at it for joint pain, like arthritic pain, is, there's a handful, actually more than a handful, more than a dozen studies that we reference in the book, that over time they've been showing that these drugs actually accelerate and degenerate the cartilage matrix of the joint through a variety of factors. Okay.
Wait a minute. So what you just said is that the prescription medication that's intended to help heal or mitigate the problem in the joint, the deterioration of the joint, is actually contributing to the deterioration of the joint. Is that what I heard you say?
Yes, it does. It does contribute to the degeneration of the joint, but it doesn't heal the joint. Remember, it's lowering inflammatory processes, but it's not healing the joint. So the interesting thing is, most patients that I'll see, for example, if I take their history of how long they had like knee pain or back pain, they might have started off with one ibuprofen a day, and later on we maybe went to one twice a day, maybe then two twice a day, and eventually they're taking maybe two twice a day plus a naproxen, or maybe the prescription drug that their provider gave them. So what happens is they started adding more and more, because the pain and the inflammation is getting worse, is because the degeneration of the joint is accelerating as the longer they're on the drug. And in fact, within 2 years in the orthopedic studies out of England, they had different centers that were looking at radiographic changes, like on an X-ray. Within 2 years, you actually can see and document, with patients with the same overall condition, just one taking, an ibuprofen and one not, you can already see these degenerative changes even just on an X-ray, just visually. And people have been taking this, they go to the big box store and they buy a 2,000 capsule bottle of this stuff.
Right.
And they just pop it for, I have a headache, I'm stressed, I'm this. And then it's in our nighttime formula, our sleep formula. So people are getting bombarded by these natural these NSAIDs, not understanding that, over time, it's not in their benefit to be taking these drugs. But more importantly, my soapbox is, is educating everybody to what a black box warning is. And for those people who don't know what a black box warning, please read my book. I go into detail, but a black box warning is the following: is that when a drug comes out to the market, the FDA, the drug company has to report, these are common side effects, and then these are some serious side effects. So common side effects: diarrhea, rash, ringing in the ears, swelling of the feet, just some kind of maybe heartburn or reflux or something like that. They're not serious, but they're common, right? So some drugs will have certain aspects that are common. Some drugs will also have serious reactions like heart attack or stroke or maybe some blood disorder or liver problem, but they're rare. Those are called serious reactions, but they're rare. But anytime a serious reaction starts to occur commonly, then the FDA puts on what they call a black box warning. And a lot of doctors were kind of misunderstood the black box warning. They just thought it was the warning that had a black box, like the label. But really, like when you think about the black box warning, is basically you can end up in the black box, which is we consider the coffin, right? And it was kind of like, this is what can happen. And it means that those actions on the black box warning can happen commonly. And so for NSAIDs, non-steroidal anti-inflammatories, the black box warning for that is having cardiovascular events, like heart attacks and strokes, regardless of your cardiovascular disease risk. Okay, higher if you have more cardiovascular disease, but someone who's still plant-based taking an NSAID could still have a heart attack, okay, or stroke. And then GI risk of a GI bleeding, perforation, and whatnot. So these are really strong issues, because when we look at, the amount of people having a heart attack every day, 3 people have a heart attack every minute in the United States. 1 person every 36 seconds actually dies from that heart attack, unfortunately. But when we started looking and analyzing, further data, is that you started looking at how many people may have not had all the other cardiovascular risk factors, but were just taking the drug that pushed them over the edge. And it's quite a lot. And in fact, my book will cover a study where they actually looked at that. And it's one of the leading causes of death outside of lifestyle, right? So like when we talk about heart disease is lifestyle, that's lifestyle.
Right.
Cancer is an environmental thing, and a variety of stress, lifestyles, a little bit of genetics and whatnot, and right now COVID is a virus that's coming around. But when we look at the pharmaceutical side effects, it's actually higher than people think. The problem is that, if someone does have a problem, well, they already had a heart disease, so we kind of chalk it up to that. Or someone has a GI bleeding, they already have other stressors and gastritis issues anyway. So it's muddled into the data, but we have to look at is, are people just taking these things that also put them at a higher risk? So for example, someone that has, say, a woman who has just menstrual cramps and she just takes 2 ibuprofen just that 1 or 2 days of the month or 3 days of the month, she can have a heart attack, a stroke, or a GI bleed at any time, even though she's not taking tons of it. Right. Or someone, after school, the kids get into the van. I always see this, the soccer moms, soccer dads, they start popping, these kids with these pills because they're sore after practice. What is that long-term effect on not only their joints, but what is also their short-term risk of them having some other problem? And so we now are even having studies that affects now microbiome, which is your gut microbiome, your immune system functioning. So these drugs, although they're helpful at the symptom of reducing pain, which we definitely want to help with our patients, but now we have to look at, is there more natural, more clinically effective and safer options? And that's what we do provide. And I do explain that in my book.
So awesome. Thank you. Two questions popped into mind to me here. One is, when you're saying that the black box warning is identifying serious conditions that have a common outcome, right? Or that commonly occur.
There's serious reactions that commonly occur.
So how is commonly defined? I mean, does that mean, well, we think about, 1 out of this or 10 out of, is there any, how, when the FDA does this sort of thing, how do they define that term commonly?
They might have an internal number, which I'm not privy to know. But when we look at common reactions like heartburn or everybody gets a little bit of this, a little bit of that,
right.
So they're common, but the serious reactions occur rarely. But when that serious reaction occurs commonly, and that's why any drug that has a black box warning, I'm always sitting down with my patient and I go through it. Now, for example, let's just look at another NSAID, which is acetaminophen. Okay, Tylenol is a brand name, but acetaminophen, right? So acetaminophen does not have a black box warning. It can still cause liver toxicity, and they change the drug dosaging, and they have to extend it more because more people get exposed. So you can have, it's not that it does not have side effects, but it doesn't have that GI, that cardiovascular risk. The problem is when people take that, it may not help their pain result as much as some of these other ones, right? So people are like, I tried that and maybe it works good for my fever or my other aches, but doesn't work really well for my joint pain. So not every drug has a black box warning, many drugs do. But when they do, I sit there and I go over that with my patient. And some of these drugs, they've been taking it for years, but that doesn't mean that the risk is not there. And from our perspective, we're always looking at reducing your risk. It's not being perfect. I'm not a perfectionist. I'm a realist. But realistically, it's like if I get a car, I want to make sure I have not only seat belts, I want to have front side airbags, backside airbags, maybe a camera, my tire pressure well. The more things that you have, then everybody eventually sometime in their life will get into an accident. Maybe get hit by some kid texting, or maybe it's the snow when car slides. However, the more things that you have to protect yourself, you're reducing your risk, the more likelihood you're able to walk away from an accident. So the goal is that we're already putting ourselves at higher risk by already having standard American lifestyle, standard American diet. As I mentioned before in the previous segment, the obesity factors, other comorbidities, right? Diabetes, obesity, hypertension, heart disease. It's already putting us at a risk of having those problems, heart disease and cancer and stroke, and now COVID risk coming into America, because now since we have all these pre-existing conditions, we have a worse outcome when we get exposed. The virus is terrible, by the way, but what's also terrible is that we're not as healthy as we proclaim to be. And our goal, and my goal with my patients, is to improve that outcome. Like, how do we reduce your risk? It's not being about perfection, but it's how do you reduce your risk? So just like everybody's like, oh, I want to add this to my car, or this is my policy. I want to make sure that I'm covering all my things to have less accidents. That's what we're trying to do with our health as well.
Got it. Okay, good. So that answered the first question. The second question is, and I think we've already addressed this, but I want to ask this again: is the impact of taking some of the, whether it's Aleve or Advil or Tylenol or whatever, and people will do that as an acute situation. I have a headache, or I don't usually get headaches. I need something because I got to go to work or whatever. They might take something. I got the impression that the impact or the effect of these medications can be cumulative. And is that accurate? Is the impact and the effect a cumulative impact?
So yes, the risk is higher the more you take, but the risk is still there just when you take it. That's why there's a black box. So the black box.
So it doesn't matter whether this is your first dose or
first dose. So you can be like going to the airport. I got a headache, and I just go to the little store, buy some water. I buy a 2-pack of one of these NSAIDs. I pop it, and then next thing you know, you can have a GI bleed or a heart attack. So it doesn't. We used to think with these medications that you had to be a NSAID junkie. The big bottles at the box store. And just popping them all day. That's not necessarily true. But what people need to really understand what a black box warning is that once a product has a black box warning, it's in the monograph of the drug, meaning it's on the insert. It's in the thing that if from a physician would be printed out. But more importantly, when you go to the pharmacy, they usually attach these papers. They just staple people. Nobody reads it. It's like micro print, and they just kind of, okay, whatever, something there. But the black box warning is on there. So what happens is that once you open up that package, once you tear open that seal, you've accepted the terms and conditions herein that this can happen, and there's no legal liability to the manufacturer.
Wow.
So this is what people. So it's just like when if I open up my phone, my cell phone, right? There's an agreement when you buy a new phone. You don't know, but it's like they can sell your data, whatever. Like that's just, if you want to buy the phone, you got to open up the package. When you open up the package, it has a seal, and you've accepted this this big document that's 50 pages long. Well, same thing people don't realize is that there's no 1-800 drug problem. You can't call the number on the screen. And so the problem that we look at is that it's okay if there was liability. But when there's no liability, then the industry continues to sell this, and that this puts people at higher risk. Not that people are intending to harm themselves, but people don't know that they think it's safer than it is, but it's not safe. That's why there's a black box warning.
Got it. Okay, thank you. So let's talk a little bit about food supplements, because as we talked about in the last segment, a whole food plant-based diet provides a tremendous more benefit. It's got antioxidants, it has fiber, it has a number of other positive things versus the cholesterols and other challenges that you get with animal-based products. But sometimes for the positive things that you can get from plants, especially spices and things like that, or other kinds of herbal things, you'd have to eat like a room full of it in order to get what you need. Right. So what about the supplement environment? And I know that Sanjevani, you guys have a certain level of supplements that you provide, but tell us a little bit about the industry, about supplements in general, and where and how they can and should be used by people.
Yeah, so one of the things that I'm known for in the industry is actually taking it. That was one of my key interests when I was learning about inflammation, is how do we actually investigate how these products are being put together? Many practitioners now of all types of fields, they just now, there's reps that come to their office and, from nutritional companies who are ex-pharma companies, in fact, or pharma agents, and they come and they just, they show you some kind of graph and they sell the products. But what people don't realize is that when you're looking at natural ingredients, there's a difference between a natural ingredient and a synthetic molecule. So for example, when I'm going back to the ibuprofen example, okay, ibuprofen is a molecule. And so that's why there's different brand names, Motrin and Advil, right? There's different brand names, but you can go to the store and buy the generic ibuprofen, Walprofen, CVS Profen, whatever Profen there is. It's the same molecule, okay? But when it comes to natural products, it's actually the opposite. And this is where practitioners and the consumers are completely confused and don't understand, is that we cannot patent a natural product because you can grow it. You can grow turmeric,
Right.
you can grow, black pepper, you can grow grapes, you can grow, green tea. The thing is, what is patentable is how we extract certain compounds, the technology, the amounts, the ratios of those compounds are patentable. And then therefore no one else can extract those compounds or those ratios to get it to that potency. So the goal is to get that potency, purity, and safety and efficacy, which is our mantra at Sanjevani. How do we utilize those four aspects of delivering what we consider nutraceuticals? How do we make these food particles into medicine? So as you said, you can't eat, tons and tons of this stuff. Yeah. And most of us haven't been eating this way all our life. A lot of cultures eat a little bit of these things daily, which we look at as a cumulative effect, as you said, is actually a positive thing. Eating anti-inflammatory foods, antioxidant foods, phytonutrients in their foods. So those are helpful over time. But when we have acute issues, for example, or we're actually flaring, is there natural products that can actually lower inflammation very successfully? Yes. Is there things that not only can help the acute situation, but actually help prevent other conditions? Yes. And we detail that much in our book. But the issue that I have with the industry is the industry is just about selling, right? So it's no different. So a lot of people like to villainize the pharmaceutical industry, and I'm not anti-pharma. I'm just pro-patient, pro-safety, pro-data. So I apply that to apply to everything. So same thing with the supplement industry. Supplement industry is no different than pharma industry. They just want to sell bottles.
Right.
And so whether it's a whole, a health food store or it's online marketing or social media, someone pushing something, the idea is that we have to look at where's it coming from? What is the source? Is it actually the potency at a dose that would have actually a clinical effect? Is it clean? Is there any kind of adulterants or not? The problem is that the industry is not regulated to that level. And so a lot of people, when they look at our products, they go, gosh, our product's kind of like, they call it like premium products. I go, well, it's because we're looking at a patent of an ingredient. We deliver it a certain way that has been shown in a clinical study. So then I know myself clinically, and the patient will know that when they take these things, they will actually have a physiological change and benefit. I can lower their blood sugar. I can lower their cholesterol. I can lower their inflammation, their blood pressure, etc. So we can actually measure that. But most people take products and they go, I just take it. How was it working? Well, I don't know. I went to the store. They told me to buy it, or I saw it on TV, or I got this email chain or funnel, and I bought something. So everything we have to look at is moving the industry to be a higher standard. And so my aspect when early in integrative medicine is that we started going to those manufacturers. So like in our office, just to give you an example, we have like 40 different contract manufacturers. Like a lot of people like, what? Like it takes a lot of time, a lot of effort to make each of these products, to make each of the ingredients. And sometimes like right now with COVID and all these supply chain issues, sometimes we're out of product and people are like, well, why don't you just, switch that out? I'm like, that's not how that works.
Yeah, right.
You just can't say, well, your drug, when your drug's not available, the pharmacy says, well, it's not available. Like so we have to understand that we're using these things naturally to have a certain clinical effect. And that's the precision of efficacy and safety that we need to deliver. And that's what we do deliver at Sanjevani.
Got it. So I know that the industry, the supplement industry, they'll have their trade shows and things like that. I actually was at one of them some years ago because of something I was working on at the time. And then you get dozens and dozens, hundreds and hundreds of companies that are there promoting whatever they're promoting, and they all have their special designs and formulas and all this kind of stuff. Are you able, in communicating with someone in that industry or by researching either online or from the literature that they provide, whether or not they have the kind of things you're talking about? Is it are you getting clarity on what's in the product? Are you getting clarity on the efficacy? Are you getting clarity on the production status of it and how it's manufactured and everything? Is that data available?
It is available, but the average person, the average promoter, the average physician, the average practitioner, they don't have the time or the energy or the education to understand that. So again, it's just led by whatever rep is walking in their door, or more importantly, which is sad to say, but what most providers are doing now on the internet and even on online sales platforms is looking at margin. So again, it's looking at, well, what's the highest margin that I'm going to get to sell this product? But that's not looking at efficacy. It's not looking at safety. It's not looking at that because they're not trained in that, right? So for them, as long as someone's putting a label on it, they can push it out there. And that's the challenge of this industry. What we like to look at in our manufacturers is that we don't have third-party people touching the product. So when we take our ingredients from the patent owner, and then we, and even the GMP, the good manufacturing practices that we use, our products are actually been supplied to clinical trials. So then, we have to disclose even more on our label than anybody else. A lot of people say, what's this little inert ingredient here? I'm like, well, anything that this pill touches, even on the machine as it goes into the bottle, we have to disclose it. Every other product in the industry uses it, but since they're not applied in clinical trials, they're not held to that standard. So a lot of,
interesting.
so it's almost like sometimes you can get dinged by being really, really honest. But the goal is like, we want to prove, most of my patients who come to me, they want to support the natural, the industry. Most people want that form of freedom. We call it medical freedom to have a choice, right? We don't want to always just be pushed a regular drug. Patients come to me and say, I don't want to take a statin, for example. I don't want to take this other pill, whatever. I have so I said, well, let's reverse your disease first. Sometimes we have to use those pills, in the acute physiology, we need to clamp down, but there's always a natural counterpart. 70% of prescription drugs actually were derived from plants. Okay. So we have to look at, what were those drugs made from, and can we find that source, and can we then find a potency, purity that's safe and effective and deliver that? And if we can, then what we're doing is we're balancing these compounds rather than taking 100% of one compound. What we call this entourage effect, or the balancing of the compounds. And then what a lot of people don't understand is that when you have training in herbal medicine, a lot of cultures, what we look at and like we provide in our products is formula. There's the ingredients that instead of just using a mono single bullet therapy, we're using the sprinkler system approach. So we're looking at things that we can give that will counterbalance even some of the minor side effects that you even get with natural therapies, that then therefore you can take it for a longer period of time without building tolerance. And that's a subtlety of experience that not many people have. And the industry, again, doesn't really matter, because whatever's new tomorrow, they'll keep pushing, trying to say better.
Right, because it's the latest and greatest and newest, and we want to sell that and make
And we just stick to tried and true. Like, is there data? Do we have clinical studies to show that this works in vitro and in vivo? And if it does, that's what we use. And are we then mimicking what was in that clinical trial to then give our patient? And we match that. When we match that, then you get the benefit of what you read in the article in your patient. The problem is a lot of people will hear something in the news, hear a headline, hear a topic, but what they actually get delivered is completely different. And then they get
makes sense.
And then the pharma industry, or some of the doctors who don't agree with natural therapies, will say, "See that?
See, I told you so." All right, yeah. Right. I want to let the audience know we have about a minute left in our segment, but I want them to know that you go into this in detail in your book, and I think it's very appropriate and relevant, because it's like almost anything that you're looking at for manufacturing, that you're going to produce a product. The quality of the manufacturing, the quality of the materials. When you think about a car, you think about a shirt, you think about, electronics, right? If the quality is not there, the device, the item is going to fall apart. It's not going to be helpful to you. The same holds true for what you're talking about when it comes to supplements. And it's all about the ingredients, it's how it's produced, it's the testing, so that we know the efficacy is there. Again, like any other product, if you don't beta test it, you're not going to figure out whether it works or not, and stuff like that. So it's really cool. So
yeah, we teach our patients to look at, ask for a certificate of analysis, how to read labels as part of my book, but we teach them in our practice, because we don't carry every single product. I don't make everything. I'm good at what we do, but even the other products that we use, like, this is past a test. This is from our clinical experience. This is what you should be using if you're picking anything out of this category. But more importantly, once you learn that skill of how to read a label too, that makes you a smarter consumer. Like, then when you're going to the store, exactly, like, this is not what they're telling me it is. No matter what it says on the front, you have to look at the nutrition label.
Look at because that they have to put.
Same thing on food. You have to look at the nutrition label. If you look at the front, they can say all what they want, because that's not regulated. That's just marketing. And you have to look at what's actually in this, and we teach that skill.
Great. Well, Dr. Pai, we have yet again run out of time. So I just want to let the folks know again, and there'll be some data about this that you'll be able to reach out, check their website, everything. But this book, An Inflammation Nation, fantastic book, very interesting, very informative, very useful and helpful. So Dr. Pai, thank you again for joining us at Reference Point. I'm going to give you like 15 seconds. Do you have any closing comments that you want to provide to our viewing audience?
So I just want to thank everybody for listening, and just if they want to learn more, they can go to our website. They can follow us on social media. Enjoy the book. Start there. That's the first place to get an integrative approach. And then if you feel like you want a consultation, definitely give us a call. And also hopefully look at the videos that we have online. Any kind of education that we'll do, we'll have a podcast coming out this year again. So hopefully that people can follow that and just learn, just like you're giving wonderful information here in this program.
Great. Dr. Pai, thank you so very much. Great information. I really appreciate your spending all this time with me over the last several episodes. And ladies and gentlemen, we'll see you next time on Reference Point.
Thank you. Best of health.